Well, turning now this morning to day 5 of the January 6th hearings, the House committee investigating the Capitol attack presented evidence yesterday allegedly showing how former President Trump attempted to use the Justice Department to overturn his 2020 election loss. 3 top former justice officials, all appointed by Trump, described what they say was a pressure campaign from the White House to get the DOJ to investigate debunked election fraud conspiracy theories. The House panel also argued that Trump tried to install a loyalist who would go along with his scheme to lead the DOJ after several senior officials threatened to resign. Here are some of the biggest takeaways from day 5.
But Donald Trump didn't just want the Justice Department to investigate. He wanted the Justice Department to help legitimize his lies, to basically call the election corrupt, to appoint a special counsel to investigate alleged election fraud, to send a letter to 6 state legislatures urging them to consider altering the election results.
Had this letter been released on official Department of Justice letterhead, it would have falsely informed all Americans, including those who might be inclined to come to Washington on January 6th, that President Trump's election fraud allegations were likely very real.
No one is going to read this letter. All anyone is going to think is that you went through 2 attorneys general in 2 weeks until you found the environmental guy to sign this thing. And so the story is not going to be that the Department of Justice has found massive corruption that would have changed the result of the election. It's going to be the disaster of Jeff Clark. And I think at that point, Pat Cipollone said, yeah, this is a murder-suicide pact, this letter.
So I said, Mr. President, you're talking about putting a man in that seat who has never tried a criminal case, who's never conducted a criminal investigation. He's telling you that he's going to take charge of the department, 115,000 employees, including the entire FBI, and turn the place on a dime and conduct nationwide criminal investigations that will produce results in a matter of days. It's impossible, it's absurd, it's not going to happen, and it's going to fail. And for the department to insert itself into the political process this way, I think would have had grave consequences for the country. It may very well have spiraled us into a constitutional crisis, and I wanted to make sure that he understood the gravity of the situation because he didn't seem to really appreciate it.
We're here today because the facts were irrelevant to President Trump. It was about protecting his very real power and very fragile ego, even if it required recklessly undermining our entire electoral system by wildly casting baseless doubt upon it. In short, he was willing to sacrifice our republic to prolong his presidency. I can imagine no more dishonorable act by a president.
Well, for more on the January 6th hearing, let's bring in former U.S. prosecutor Barbara McQuade. She's an NBC News legal contributor and professor at the University of Michigan Law School. Good morning, Barbara. Chairman Benny Thompson describing Trump's actions leading up to the insurrection as an attempted, quote, political coup. First off, your reaction to what you heard about Trump and the DOJ yesterday.
Well, it really was an incredibly dramatic showdown that we heard about yesterday at the Oval Office. And I think one thing that's most remarkable is Donald Trump didn't stop because he was convinced it was just the wrong thing to do. He didn't get a sudden moment of conscience. He only stopped because these Justice Department lawyers convinced him it would fail. And so one of the things we know from other hearings is he didn't just stop and stand down. He just pivoted to a different tactic. He turned his attention to Mike Pence. This is January 3rd. He continues all the way through January 6th in still trying to achieve the same ends, just through a different means. And so we came remarkably close to seeing perhaps 100 or more Justice Department and White House lawyers resign on January 3rd. Maybe it would have been better if they had, because that would have exposed the lie earlier, and we're only learning about it much later.
Yeah, that would have been something, those resignations. Well, one key piece of evidence the committee presented was a draft letter written in part by Jeffrey Clark saying falsely that the DOJ found evidence of widespread voter fraud. Clark allegedly wanted to send this to the Georgia legislature, but other DOJ officials refused to sign on. Here's what White House lawyer Eric Hirschman said yesterday about his reaction to that letter.
And when he finished discussing what he planned on doing, I said, good effing a-hole. Congratulations, you just admitted a first step or act you take as Attorney General would be committing a felony and violating Rule 6C. You're clearly the right candidate for this job.
As a former prosecutor, what does that letter signal, if anything, to you?
Well, it shows that Jeffrey Clark was willing to assist Donald Trump in this effort to undermine our election. He was willing to put in there things he knew to be false. The other men on the Justice Department leadership had been telling Donald Trump, as Jeffrey Rosen said, just about daily, that they were investigating these claims and there was absolutely no merit to them. For him to write in a letter that there actually was merit to them, that they had found irregularities, and then suggesting that they convene their state legislatures for the purpose of selecting alternate electors is so far out of bounds of anything the Justice Department should be doing. And so they were right to force him to stop and to show his hand. But I'm proud of the fact that we had some strong leadership at the Justice Department. Imagine if we had it filled with a group of Jeff Clarks who had allowed us to go down that road. I think our Justice Department would look very different than it does today. And it may be that this coup would have succeeded.
And Barbara, we also heard about that dramatic meeting in the Oval Office on January 3rd between Trump and top justice officials who essentially said they'd resign if Jeffrey Clark was appointed as Attorney General. In your view, how does that alleged pressure campaign fit into the larger case the committee is making about Trump's responsibility for the Capitol attack?
Well, it is, I think it makes it stand in stark relief because he knows that on January 3rd, more than 100 lawyers will be willing to resign as opposed to let him go through with this. And although he backs down on that particular strategy, on January 6th, he goes out and he repeats those same lies after they have debunked them completely in front of him. And yet he still makes those statements on the ellipse on January 6th. He still urges Mike Pence to throw out the electors in the House when he's counting the votes. And so I think it just adds to his criminal knowledge and criminal intent when he persists in this fraud, even after he is told it is absolutely false.
More drastic claims from that fifth day of hearings. Barbara McQuade, thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.